Krishnan Gurumurthy was talking a moment ago to Lord Archer, who was going to be giving a party tonight. I don't know whether he still is or whether he's cancelled it after he heard our exit poll, but let's join him.
Well, with me now is Lord Archer. Lord Archer, you're holding a small dinner party this evening. Is it a wake?
Certainly not. We don't even know the results yet.
Well, we have a good indication from the exit poll, at least. What's your reaction to that?
Well,
it's a landslide according to that.
I remember the exit poll last time, and it was certainly bear no relation to the actual result several hours later.
But you're not expecting the same result as last time tonight,
no,
are you?
I think that is unlikely. I would agree.
And so how do you think it's going to go?
It's hard to tell at this point, but I would suspect we are set for a Labour victory.
And what do you think that means?
That means 5 years of Labour power.
What does it mean for the Conservatives?
Well, we will have to regroup. We'll have to reconsider our position, and we will have to make sure we're good in opposition. And I suspect, having handed over the strongest economy in Europe, and indeed one of the biggest successes of this century, we'll have to see, with the Labour Party starting with such a good start, such advantages, what they do with it.
Well, you've been saying Britain's booming, don't let Labour blow it. Are they going to blow it? Is Britain going down the tubes now?
I hope they don't blow it. If that is the result, if Mr. Blair is the Prime Minister, I wish him every success, and I congratulate him on his victory. And of course we will attempt to be good in opposition, something we haven't done for a long time. We don't have the experience of the Labour Party in opposition, but then they don't have our experience in government.
And who are you backing for the lead?
Well, now, a deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, the man who wrote the House of Cards, and the man who incidentally was involved in all the negotiations about the debate, which, remember, we were going to get. We don't, not yet on the record exactly how it fell apart, but anyway, we were going to get this great debate between the two party leaders, or the three party leaders. Anyway, he is there, Michael Dobbs, and he's with John Sopel.
Mr. Dobbs, Edwina Currie this evening has said that the Tory campaign was a campaign run by kids. It's been a shambles, she said.
Well, perhaps I can thank Edwina for all the helpful advice that she has given to us during the campaign, and perhaps get on to some more serious subjects. I mean, if these exit polls are accurate, and we are going to lose tonight, I can still stand here and say that I take tremendous pride in having helped fight elections for 18 years. You know, when we fought the 1979 election, we took over a country which was crucified by discontent, split apart. And if we are handing the country over to another government tonight, it's a country which has a strong economy, which is, they're not riots in the streets.
But if you have done so well, why have you done so badly?
Because I suspect there is simply a mood in the country for change. There are no great demands for a Labour government out there. There are no great riots against the Conservative Party out there. There is simply a decision, a time for a change. And that has proved to be, I think, a pretty overwhelming appeal.
The other thing that Edwina Currie said before your Central Council conference in Bath was that if John Major loses, he should go quickly.
Well, I suspect there'll be other voices within the Conservative Party which will be heard rather more seriously than Edwina's. Edwina hasn't been at the centre of this campaign. I think she should have gone back to South Derbyshire rather than Belfast to fight her campaign. I hope, for the sake of those in South Derbyshire, all those Conservatives in South Derbyshire, that the result there is a good one.
Michael Dobbs, thank you very much indeed. Back to you, David.
So, Peter, if we were to have a look on the basis of this swing at the kind of seats that Labour should be targeting, what would they be?
Right. Now, let's have a look at how Labour's targeting is set and what will happen if their targeting is effective. This is our way of doing it. This is our Labour targets fly-around, as we call it. You can see how they're ranked by the size, the blue block, and incidentally 3 yellow blocks and 1 green block for Plaid Cymru over there in Ceredigion, 3 gold blocks for the Liberal Democrats. These blocks represent the gap between Labour and these targets. And this is not the battleground as such, it's the battleground for Labour. It's Labour's targets. Some of them, as you can see, like Tynemouth, the one I mentioned earlier, a middle-sized block. Mr. Blair has to shoot that one down in order to get a Labour majority at all. Portsmouth North, a socking great big block here, majority of about 9,000 down there in the general election. If Mr. Blair hits targets like that, he's going to win a landslide majority. So what we'll be doing is flying around the country, looking at the little boxes down here, the hits and the misses, as we go through the night. And if Mr. Blair can hit something like half of these targets, or just over half, as he crosses them when the real results start coming in, there's London coming up there with Simon Hughes's Southwark and Bermondsey seat, a great block of gold in the middle there. Now we go across the Midlands with a little glimpse of Rochdale, another target for Labour. That should go down quite easily because Labour are way ahead of the Liberal Democrats. Up in Scotland, there's Malcolm Rifkind waiting to be shot at. Stirling, a tiny tile there, Michael Forsyth's seat. and a seat up there at Inverness, which is also a Labour target. So there they are. Watch what happens through the night. Notice there are 3 essential clusters of seats for Mr. Blair to aim at. The northwest up here and Bradford and Leeds, vital targets there. Birmingham and the area around there. Incidentally, Bury North is just the right size. There's a Bury seat there, which Mr. Blair needs to hit if he's to get an overall majority. And then London, an essential cluster of targets here, and the home counties in London. For example, quite an easy one to hit, just peeping out from under here, Angela Rumbold's seat in Mitcham and Morden. Easy one for Labour to catch. David.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, let's go to Mitcham and Morden and hear perhaps a bit about Angela Rumbold, but also about the targets in London and how Labour appear to be doing. Emily Buchanan is there. Emily?
Well, in Mitcham and Morden here, the Labour Party is actually holding its cards quite close to its chest, and although there was some applause after the result in Sunderland South, they're not being overly outward about their celebrations yet. I spoke to a Conservative Party strategist and canvasser here who was completely baffled by what the exit polls are saying. He was saying that if the exit polls are right, then the Conservative Party has to totally rethink the way it does its canvassing, because many of the voters he's spoken to seem to be implying that they had a lot of enthusiasm for Angela Rumbold, and he would even have been predicting Angela Rumbold increasing her majority, which of course looks very unlikely according to the exit polls.
What you say is very interesting, because it only needs just under a 2% swing for Angela Rumbold to be defeated, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it looks like a key target seat which Labour ought to easily win. In fact, it's one of the many seats around the inner city which Labour has been targeting to show that it can move into the suburbs of London. But we've also heard news of some of the marginals outside of London. In St Albans, for instance, we hear that Labour may be moving from 3rd place to 1st place. And we've also heard that possibly in an unprecedented way, Labour may actually win 5 seats in Hertfordshire and 5 seats in Kent, traditionally very, very strong Tory seats.
Emily, thanks very much. Now, Carol Walker is in Birmingham, covering the whole Midlands scene. You heard what was said down there in Mitcham and Morden. Have you got any indications of whether the kind of wipeout that we've been talking about is likely to happen in the Midlands?
Well, that certainly looks like a strong possibility. Here at the National Indoor Arena in Birmingham, we're looking at the biggest multiple count in the land, 11 seats being counted here. A couple of early key marginals, which I think will give us a very clear idea of the way things are going. Birmingham Edgbaston, we're hoping to have within the next hour. Now, that is a seat that has been a Conservative seat for 75 years, used to be Dame Jill Knight's seat, and Gisela Stewart for the Labour Party has very high hopes of achieving a 5% swing. Now, that is 67 on Labour's target list of seats. So if that one falls to the Labour Party, that should give us a pretty clear indication of the way things are going. Shortly after that, we should be getting Birmingham Hall Green, another seat that's never ever been a Labour seat, and Councillor Stephen McCabe for Labour, high hopes of a 4% swing there. That one's number 51 on Labour's list of targets. And incidentally, also here, we have Sir Norman Fowler, who's got the 2nd safest Tory seat in the land in Sutton Coldfield. And I must say, there is speculation that he might end up being virtually the only Conservative MP in this whole area.
OK, Carol, thanks very much. And Sarah Barclay in Bury North.
Well, in Bury North, it's the sitting MP Alistair Burt, the Tory minister who set up the Child Support Agency, and it looks as if the result could be very close indeed, much closer, I think, than people had thought before. The Labour candidate, David Chater, is not particularly well known locally. Alistair Burt has been a popular MP here for 14 years, and it looks as if the result could be very close. Other seats to watch up here are Chester, which has never been Labour before and which needs only a small percent swing to take it. Rochdale, Southport and Hazel Grove, which the Lib Dems will be fighting for very hard indeed. And in Blackpool, North and South, neither of which have ever been Labour before, it looks as though the Labour Party could win, particularly in Blackpool South.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Hamilton South, where we have a declaration.
Brown, Referendum Party, 316. Colin Stewart Gunn, Pro-Life Alliance, 684. Robert Dow Kilgour, the Scottish Conservatives and Unionist candidate, 2858. Richard Pitts, Liberal Democrat, 1,693. George Robertson, the Labour Party candidate, 21,709. The number of spoil papers, 26. I declare that George Robertson has been duly elected to serve in Parliament as a member for the Hamilton South constituency. Thank you.
George Robertson, who is the shadow Scottish Secretary, probable Scottish Secretary in the Labour government, with a majority of 15,800 with the Scottish National Party there in second place, Conservatives in third. Let's just hear from Mr. Robertson.
Making Hamilton South the first constituency result in Scotland, and I think perhaps the second in the whole country. That is a great achievement. And of course, can I thank with you all of your staff, both here and in the polling stations all day, for a magnificent effort that added up to the result here this evening. Also to the police and to all those who have been involved in this count. This evening, we are here at a historic time when a historic decision has been taken for our whole country. It is clear from these first two results, and indeed from the exit polls, that there is going to be a Labour government in this country after 18 years, and that this country will move in a completely new and better direction. And in this campaign in Scotland, the Scottish Labour Party did it with Scotland, and we did it for Scotland, and for all the people in Scotland as well. And as we move forward now into a completely new era for our country, the people have placed their trust in us, and we will fulfil that trust for them as well.
George Robertson there, likely to be Secretary of State for Scotland. Well, we can now join Edwina Currie, who's with Martin Bashir at her count. She, remember, you said it would be a miracle if she won. Martin.
Thank you, David. Mrs. Currie, you've heard the BBC's own exit poll suggesting the worst Conservative share of the vote this century. Your reaction to that?
Well, I'm disappointed that it's as low as that. My prediction would have been about 33–34% based on what we were finding here in South Derbyshire. But there is no doubt that we're going to have a very poor result tonight.
Who's to blame? What's gone wrong?
My impression from our polling here has been that people changed their minds, switched over, actually quite a long time ago, 92, 93 perhaps. But once Mr. Blair came in and started to revolutionise his party and modernise it, then a lot of the resistance to voting Labour also disappeared. And at that point, I think they had it made.
Has it been a problem with policies or simply with presentation?
I think it's been a bit of a problem with everything, and a serious analysis has to be done. But one thing's for certain. I've always said that the electorate here has never voted into office a party that is antagonistic to Europe. And that looks as if it's happening once again, that moving Eurosceptic, Martin, has done us no good whatsoever, and the electorate have rejected us.
You said earlier that if the Tories lost disastrously, then you would recommend that John Major shouldn't, in your words, hang about. Is that still your view?
Well, I know some of my pro-European colleagues feel that John Major ought to hang on and perhaps even stay till October or November for the sake of party unity.
Your view?
But I think that would be a disaster. I think it would be a tragedy for the man, who's an honourable and decent man, who's, I think, been very battered right through this campaign. My preference is that we should get the leadership contest underway as soon as this election is out of the way. And I hope they'll make the right choice.
Who's your favoured candidate for that leadership contest?
I think it depends who's going to come forward, who is prepared to put himself or herself into the ring.
Do you have a favourite yourself?
Well, my favourite used to be John Major. What I hope is that we have somebody who is wisely and sensibly pro-European and can carry the nation forward.
Mr. Michael Portillo has been mentioned as a potential leader. In fact, by a number of the national newspapers, they are naming him as the favourite. Your reaction to him as a potential leader?
Well, I think in this area, in the Midlands, in these marginal seats, somebody like Ken Clarke would go down much better. But then, of course, he is a Midlands member, and we know him very well in Nottinghamshire. And possibly after that, Michael Heseltine, if there are no worries about his health. After that, I think we should be looking at somebody like Jill Shepherd, if she holds her seat, which, of course, is being talked about. But we have to see. What I'm not certain about is an anti-European, very right-wing, rather extreme personality, or simply make sure that we go into the next election campaign in exactly the same sort of state we've gone into this one.
And that's Mr. Portillo as far as you're concerned?
They're all very good and honourable people, and they're all rather shrewd people. They may well get there by being right-wing, but they may then stay by being more sensible.
Thank you very much.
Martin Bashir with Edwina Currie. Well, she was talking about Michael Heseltine, but saying that she preferred Ken Clarke. Michael Heseltine himself, imperturbable as ever, arrived a moment ago at the Tory party headquarters in Smith Square in London. And that's the first big arrival there. We've been told that a number of ministers are going to turn up there over the night. So let's hear a bit more now from Jeremy. Jeremy, to you.
David,
one thing I should say, I don't know whether you heard, but the two I thought rather interesting, two reporters, one in the northwest and one in the southeast, Mitcham and Morden, saying that what they were hearing on the ground was that the swing wasn't of the scale, or the wipeout wasn't of the scale that we picked up on the exit poll. I mean, whether this is right or wrong, one doesn't know until one gets results from there, but obviously either the Tories are bluffing or something slightly different is happening from what we said.
Very interesting. I don't know, we'll find out. Perhaps I might get some indication now. We're going to be talking, I think, to Stephen Dorrell, who joins us from his count. How bad is it, Mr. Dorrell?
Well, the answer is, of course, we don't know whether it's good or bad until the votes have been counted. Both in 1987 and in 1992, we were served up exit polls which predicted Labour governments, and in the event there wasn't a Conservative government elected by the voters. So we don't know what the result is, and I don't think it's very sensible to speculate about it when we all know that the result, the true result, is going to be available within a few hours.
Do you agree with Edwina Currie that it was the divisions in your party, and particularly the behaviour of the Eurosceptics, that did for you?
I don't accept by any means that the result of the election has yet been decided, or at least that it's yet known. I do agree with what I heard Michael Portillo saying earlier on in your programme, namely that a party that presents a united face to the electorate is a party that strengthens its claim to their support. But that is clearly true.
If a party cannot be forced into unity by one leader, isn't it time to change the leader?
No, I don't think that we need to get into speculation about what the lessons are from a result that we don't yet know.
So you think John Major should stay?
I think we should. It is better for us to take these issues one at a time. The first thing we need to know is what is the decision that the voters have made. And only when we know that can we then start to think about what lessons the voters have been seeking to teach the Conservative Party.
Mr. Dorrell, thank you. We're also joined now by Malcolm Rifkind, the Foreign Secretary, from his count. How bad is it for you, Mr. Rifkind?
Well, I don't know any more than you do at the moment. They're just beginning to add up the total votes before they distribute them between the candidates, so you'll have to be patient just a little bit longer.
Just so we're clear that the Cabinet is at least united on this matter, you do share the view of Stephen Dorrell and Michael Portillo that what damaged you, what did for you, was the fact that you were divided.
Well, I think there are a number of factors, but obviously any party that gives the impression of not being united, that cannot help you in an election.
Are you confident you'll hang on to your own seat?
I'm extremely hopeful. There's some quite encouraging signs, but I frankly don't know any more than you do at this stage. I would be guessing.
Being hopeful isn't quite the same as being confident, is it?
Well, it's because you're asking me to predict it. I mean, are you just wanting me to use the usual optimism that all candidates use, or are you trying to find out if I have some privileged access to information? I haven't counted the ballots yet, so I don't actually know any more than you do, but I'm very happy to sound optimistic.
How long do you think John Major will stay as leader?
As long as he wishes.
What do you mean, beyond tomorrow?
I'm sure much longer than that.
Malcolm Rifkind, thank you very much. David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well, now, Tony King, let's just go back to that second result we had in Scotland, Hamilton South.
Yes, we shouldn't ignore the result in Hamilton South, quite apart from the fact that George Robinson is likely to be a cabinet minister within the next 36 hours. In fact, the swing in Hamilton, if we look just at the swing from Conservatives to Labour, was 8%. Our exit poll was predicting a swing from Conservatives to Labour in Scotland of almost exactly 8%. So it does look as though the exit poll is more or less spot on. We may produce a slightly smaller majority than was earlier anticipated, but it is still going to be an enormously good result. Notice the other thing about Hamilton South is the Scottish National Party actually losing a few percentage points. This was going to be, they hoped, a big night for the SNP. Well, it didn't work out quite that way in that particular constituency near Glasgow.
We're joined by the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael Heseltine, from the Conservative Party headquarters. Mr. Heseltine, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Well, you've already started to say that this campaign needs careful analysis, suggesting that you accept it hasn't quite worked out as you hoped.
Well, the opinion polls haven't worked out, and the exit polls haven't worked out, and the first result hasn't worked out. But as everybody knows, these are not yet an analysis of the full results, and we therefore have to be cautious about it. But it is certainly disappointing at this stage.
Michael Portillo says that it's disunity that was the problem for the Tory party. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's important to have a mature period of reflection to look at all the questions, all the answers. And what is critical is that the party finds a way to regroup, unite, and begin the fight back. We are a hugely successful political party, governing this country far longer than any other political party. And what I do think is a great danger is now to sort of get into a sort of onion peeling process in the heat of election results, which are frankly, the analysis is better done within the private discussions that must go on within the Conservative Party.
What does regroup mean?
Regroup is simply what you do when you have found yourself on the wrong end of an election defeat, if that's what happens to us.
Does it imply that the Prime Minister will resign as leader of the party?
Well, I hope not. I've spent, well, whatever months and years it is, doing everything I could to help him govern the country, to win this election campaign, and I think that he has proved of the highest caliber as a Prime Minister. I have no doubt at all that his period in office will be seen as having laid the economic rocks of opportunity for this country as the next century dawns. He has proved a very extraordinary leader of our country, and I had very much wanted to see him re-elected to that job, and I hope still, but however the polls don't indicate it, that it would have been the position.
But surely if he's led you to the worst defeat for the Tories since the Duke of Wellington, you can't be saying that he should continue to lead you to the next election.
Well, people have spent quite a lot of time trying to separate myself off from the Prime Minister, and they've always failed. I've been proud to serve him and greatly honoured when he made me Deputy Prime Minister. I've given him every support, and as long as he's leader of the Conservative Party, he will continue to get that support.
So you're saying you're standing beside him until he makes his decision. You don't have any inkling what his decision would be?
No, I am going to back him all the way, because without the slightest shadow of doubt, on the record, he has achieved what very, very, very few leaders of our party and Prime Ministers have done, an economic prospect which is glittering as the next century dawns.
And why should the electorate have sleepwalked, in your words, to disaster?
Well, those are the sort of questions we'll have to ask ourselves. And as I said, I don't myself go for the sort of onion peeling technique within hours of the polls closing. I think these require mature reflection. A lot of very senior colleagues will want to play their part in it. And there is absolutely nothing to be gained from a debate when one person says one thing, one says another, one asks one question, one gives a different answer. That is a way which is very fascinating to the media, but it is not the best interest of the Conservative Party.
But of course it did sound as if you weren't blaming your colleagues, but blaming the electorate when you said they were sleepwalking to disaster if they voted Labour.
I think
the voters out there are at fault.
I must tell you that whilst I have to respect the verdict, if that is what it is to be, I have to tell you that the views that the Prime Minister expressed of the consequences of Labour government will become apparent rather more rapidly, I suspect, than people have ever realised.
Mr. Heseltine, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Michael Heseltine, Deputy Prime Minister. And now we go around some of the key seats, the ones that will give us an indication of how things are going in this election. Andrew Harvey, first of all, is in Norwich North. Andrew.
Yeah, David, we were hearing the message from the southeast and the northwest about the Conservative vote holding up rather better. That's the message we're getting from East Anglia too. They do claim that their vote's holding up. They simply don't believe the exit poll figures. Mind you, that's not going to help them very much in Norwich North because it only needs a 2% swing here to push the seat over to Labour. Labour in Norwich has the reputation of being one of the best organised party in the country, and that may have been crucial in bringing the important votes in. We're expecting a declaration here in about an hour's time. They've put double the number of normal counters on here. They've got 100 people working away at the ballot boxes, so we should get a declaration from Norwich North in about an hour's time.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And Mark Mardell in Basildon. Of course, Basildon was the seat that told everybody that the Tories had not only not done as badly, had done a great deal better than the exit poll suggested last time round. What's the story tonight?
Yes, I think that's right. That early indication last time, there was that huge grin on the face of David Amess, which I think is seared on the minds of many Labour supporters, that first indication. Well, it ain't going to happen again, partly because Mr Amess has fled to a safer seat, but also it seems that Labour have done very well here. They're pretty confident they've taken the seat. Interestingly, they say a lot of votes going from the Conservatives to the referendum candidate here, so that may be one reason. But it's an important seat because it's one that was Labour in the dim and distant past, was taken by the Tories in the Thatcherite revolution of '79 and has never been taken back. So we're expecting a result here about 1/2 from Basildon.
And Michael Crick in Wolverhampton Southwest. Michael.
Yes, well, the big question here, David, is whether one of the great parliamentary mavericks, Nick Budgeon, can hold on. Mr. Budgeon inherited this seat, Wolverhampton Southwest, from Enoch Powell 23 years ago, and holds very similar views to Mr. Powell on things like Europe, where he was one of the whipless rebels over Maastricht and so on. And indeed, he's raised the issue of immigration in this campaign. Now, the parties here are saying they think it'll be close, but if the exit poll and if the result in Sunderland is reflected here, then certainly Mr. Budgeon will lose. And I was going around the polling stations this afternoon, and I found that roughly 1 in 6 of the people who said that they'd voted for Mr. Budgeon last time haven't done so today, in which case the House of Commons will lose one of its great independent spirits.
Thank you very much, Michael. And Jill Dando, lastly, in Portsmouth North. Jill?
Well, David, there does seem to be an aura of Labour confidence here. Now, whether that translates into local seats remains to be seen. We should know in about an hour's time, because both constituencies, Portsmouth North, Portsmouth South, they're both being counted here, and they're both aiming to declare at the same time. Now, Portsmouth North has traditionally been quite a safe Tory seat, but this time it's definitely a race between the Tory holder, the Peter Griffiths, and the Labour candidate, a very local, well-liked man. He's been in politics for 26 years, Sid Rapson. Now, he has said to us that he is allowing himself to feel very confident tonight. If Labour win Portsmouth North, it'll be an 8% swing. It's 100th on Labour's target list. 69.9% turnout in Portsmouth North. Portsmouth South, again, a very interesting constituency. It was held on to in 1992 by the Conservative David Martin, as you may remember, by a very wafer-thin majority of 242. The Liberal Democrat Mike Hancock lost out then. You may remember Mike Hancock won for the SDP in 1984, subsequently lost to David Martin in 87. Now, the Lib Dems, it's second on their list. It needs just a 0.2% swing. But again, Labour are proving very strong in Portsmouth South. Their candidate, again, a local man, Alan Burnett, a university lecturer, and coincidentally, the university plays a very strong part in the Portsmouth life, about 11,000 students. So, of course, he may do very well. This was seen as a two-way marginal, Portsmouth South, but it could very well go one of three ways. So a very exciting time here in Portsmouth.
Thanks very much. And now we go to our roving reporter, Frank Skinner.
Well, I'm in the borough of Harrogate and Knaresborough, and I'm looking for the returning officer. Philip, how are you? Good to see you. Nice necklace. So you're the mayor of Harrogate and Knaresborough?
Yes, that's right.
That's a bit of a job and a half.
Oh, it's not too bad.
Come on, it's
Good
easy.
steady. Good
Now,
steady
tonight,
job.
tonight you are the returning officer. It's quite posh up here, isn't it? The sort of place they keep a sheet of newspaper under the cuckoo clock.
That's right, yes. You heard, have you?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're the returning officer, and you'll be reading this speech tonight. And we need lots of these tonight, so would you like to give it a spin?
Do you want me to give it a go?
Yeah.
I, being the returning officer for the constituency of Harrogate and Knaresborough, do hereby declare...
Oh, you're a bit northern at the moment. You've gone common.
What's wrong with being northern?
Oh, they don't like that up here, though.
Do you want me to put my...
Put your posh Harrogate and Knaresborough
The
voice
posh
on.
Harrogate and
Yeah.
Knaresborough voice on. Right, here goes. I, being the returning officer for the constituency of Harrogate and Knaresborough, do hereby declare that the number of votes cast in this election are...
Cast, I like a lot. That's
with
good.
an R, you notice the R.
Oh, very good. Now, your big star name up here is Norman Lamont.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, I wondered, because you hear this speech all night, you know, and the returning officer, blah, 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 if there's anything you could do with your speech that would maybe give it a bit more sparkle.
Well, I could put give it his... What, you mean do something to his name?
Well, Norman Lamont, for example.
Give it a French sound or a native Scottish sound or something like
Yeah,
that.
try
Right, you
that.
mean like French. Let's do Le Mans.
That would be great.
Le Mans, without the T.
Okay, it's a motor race, but also it could be an MP, yeah.
But what about... motor? What about Scottish? Scottish descent?
Yeah.
He's got a Scottish... His descendant Scottish. Right. Lamont. Lamont.
That sounds...
Mr. Lamont.
That sounds good to me. If you can stick one of them in for us tonight, and we'll be watching closely, that would be fantastic.
Right.
Now, you became a councillor the same day that Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister.
I
That's
did,
right.
yeah.
And what I like, you knew where you were with Mrs. Thatcher.
Oh, you certainly knew where you were.
It was just being there without a paddle that I didn't like.
Ken Skinner there. And then the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kenneth Clarke, arrived a moment ago at his count at Rushcliffe. He's been reviled by Nicholas Winterton, who actually said he'll be remembered, even reviled in history for his action, putting the blame for the poor Conservative general election campaign on Mr. Clarke, who's got a safe seat in Rushcliffe. And Sir George Gardner at Reigate, where he's standing for the referendum party, having insulted the Prime Minister and been kicked out by his own local party. And he's standing there, not likely that he'll take that seat, but he's lost a lot of loyal Tories. And Sebastian Coe, down in the West Country. Three-way fight in Falmouth and Camborne. Liberal Democrats chasing him, and Labour hot on the heels of the Liberal Democrats. It's inside. It looks as though it's outside in daylight, but I think they're actually in a hall there. And Lance Price joins us now from Enfield, Michael Portillo's seat. Michael Portillo was here in the studio a moment ago, but he's gone on his way back to his count there. Lance, he's not in any trouble there, is he?
Well, it would be astonishing if he was. It would take a swing of approaching 15% for him to lose this seat here. But the indications are, no one is predicting that Michael Portillo is going to lose this seat, but the indications from the Labour side are that they have been doing particularly well in wards where they thought they didn't stand any chance at all, where until last week or the week before they weren't even really canvassing those wards, and they now think that they may have won them. So if that were to be the case, accompanied by a lower turnout perhaps among Conservative voters, then it could be a very tight result for Michael Portillo here.
Lance, thanks very much. Jeremy.
David, thank you very much. We're joined now from his constituency in Hartlepool, from his count there, by Peter Mandelson, who will doubtless be accorded the accolade of being the architect of this Labour victory, if that's what it turns out to be. Our congratulations in order, Mr. Mandelson?
Not yet, Jeremy, because we don't know the result, but you are nonetheless very warmly welcome to Hartlepool.
Well, that's very illuminating. Now, what do you think was the thing that swung it for you?
What swung it was New Labour. I mean, people have been coming towards us steadily over the last 10 years, but it was the transformation of the Labour Party, the rebirth of the Labour Party in the last 2 or 3 years that finally clinched it for people.
Well, we have Neil Kinnett with us here in the studio. He was the man who gave you the job originally.
He did, in 1985.
Why could you do it for Tony Blair and not for him?
He had to go off and fight a seat in 1992. The boy's got to look after himself. Anyway, he's done brilliantly, and I don't think anybody can take that away from him, and I'm delighted for him. I just wish he'd grow his moustache back.
Okay. David.
No way.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Tony Blair's house, we thought we were going to see Mr. Blair coming out of his house, but the curtain's been very firmly drawn. So I think we'll wait for the curtain to flicker again, Jeremy.
Okay. I mean, the difference between then and now, given that it was Peter Mandelson, that the campaign organiser in each case, was, I suppose, that in 1992 you had a change of image, but you hadn't junked a lot of the policies. Now you've had a change of image and junked the policies.
Well, the policies were changed, and as Peter said, well, yes, they were jettisoned. Some of the policies were jettisoned, others were extensively modified. But as Peter said, people were moving towards us. They needed, in some ways, first of all, reassurance that our changes weren't cosmetic, that they weren't simply electoral opportunism. And at the 1992 defeat, I said to the Parliamentary Labour Party, only time really would demonstrate that the changes were deep-rooted and completely sincere. And secondly, to some extent, and I say this with no joy at all, people had to learn that the forecasts that we made about what would happen under a further Conservative government were actually accurate, and I think they've had that demonstrated. It's a pity that people had to suffer features like negative equity in the meantime.
But if you ditched Clause 4, you might have won that election.
It's conceivable that it would have sharpened the mind of the party. I don't think that by itself would have made sufficient difference.
Peter Mandelson, all the forecasts are you will have a thumping great majority. Will that encourage Tony Blair to be what he told the Observer he was going to be, a lot more radical in government than he seemed during the campaign?
No, we will be implementing a radical set of policies, but they will only be the policies that are contained in our manifesto.
Well, they're not very radical.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. If we are elected as New Labour, as I think is going to be the case, we will govern as New Labour, and we will deliver what we have promised to deliver, nothing more and nothing less.
Peter Mandelson, thank you very much. David.
We're about to get a third result of the night declared by the returning officer in Wrexham. Only 2 results have so far been declared in this general election at the counts, and Wrexham is coming up, and this is North East Wales, and it's a safe Labour seat, mining area, and it's held by Dr. John Marrick, who's actually a mathematician, rather a quiet presence in the House of Commons. For 17 years or so he taught mathematics down at the university in Aberystwyth. And what will be interesting here, again, it's Labour in first place, 50% of the vote they got last time round, The Conservatives got 32%, the Liberal Democrats 15%. So it'll be an indication for us whether that exit poll is still standing up, as it has so far, Tony King, hasn't it?
It stood up very well so far. It'll be interesting to see whether John Marrett gets, depending on the turnout, about 23 or 24,000 votes. If turnout has stayed at its previous level, then that's what he should do. That did not happen in Sunderland South, which is why Chris Mullen didn't get quite as many votes as we were supposing.
But the swing we'll be looking for will be sort of 11%, roughly, something
will
like
be
that.
between 10 and 12%, absolutely.
Yes. They all seem to be standing there without much going on. I don't know what's happening, because all the candidates are there and the returning officer in the centre. It's like sort of... looks like a sort of rather embarrassed school prize giving. They are early declarers by design. That's to say, they're one of those places. Torbay used to be one, but isn't this year because of the local elections, which makes a point of getting its face on the television screen by being an early declarer.
I just mentioned as they finish the bits and pieces that the turnout has been 71%.
Turnout of 71%, he says. Well, Robin, what do you make of this, the reports we've been having from our own correspondents out in the field, that the landslide doesn't feel to them in line with our exit poll? Do you think that's just...
I think that's what they're being told by Tory party workers and Tory agents. All through this campaign, we've had Tories saying they are absolutely baffled by the opinion poll figures. They can't understand why there isn't more feel-good factor coming through. And I think we're probably not getting as good a quality of canvasser as we used to get in the old days, particularly if too many people are doing telephone canvassing and not seeing the whites of their eyes. Because if you go around as a journalist at a by-election, you follow the canvassers to the doorstep, people on the doorstep are very polite. The British are a polite nation. They don't like to say they're not going to vote for somebody. And when you speak to them afterwards, they say, I wouldn't vote for that shower if they came down the driveway with a barrow full of fivers.
And the first reports from Conservative Central Office where they were shattered by the exit poll and they were shattered by what they were hearing from their own constituencies.
I think they're quite genuinely surprised because that's not the message they've got on the doorstep.
Yes. Tony Blair, first glimpse of him at his house, Marabella in Trimdon. He's going from there to the Count. There he is, the man who will be Prime Minister tomorrow when he goes to Buckingham Palace, probably late tomorrow morning. And that's Alistair Campbell, his press secretary. There's Mr. Blair behind. Well, there we are. Just a brief glimpse of Tony Blair. And he'll be going down to his Count. He's then going to go to the Trimdon Labour Club, and we'll hear from him there, and then we plan to go down south later on today. We're joined by Gordon Brown now, from Dunfermline East. Mr. Brown, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Well, it looks as though you're going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer by tomorrow afternoon.
Well, I think we'll wait and see. I think I'm waiting for my result. I think you've had two results so far. It looks as if Labour has done very well, but I was the one who said to all our candidates on Monday, take nothing for granted, and I will stick that way for the time being.
It's rare to see you smiling quite so much on a television interview, Mr. Brown. I suspect you...
I always smile when I'm interviewed by you, David.
Well, save the flattery. I suspect you know that you've won, and won by a very handsome margin.
Well, if we have won, I think it's not just a rejection of the Conservatives. It is about new Labour. It is about a new type of politics for this country. I think it's a desire on the part of everybody to tackle the very real social problems that form the basis of our manifesto. And it's a desire also that we have a government that will equip us for the future, a government that is on people's side, and I think that is why people have been voting Labour in increased numbers today.
How different is it from having, say, a majority of 30 or 40, if you really do have a landslide on the scale of 1945, in terms of what you can do in government and what you plan to do? I mean, we remember Tony Blair saying he'd be more radical than people thought.
Well, by radical, what Tony Blair meant is that we'll tackle the problems of education. We'll tackle the problems of the health service. We'll tackle the problems of unemployment. This was a manifesto about change in Britain and about making possible a country that is properly equipped for the future. So we are ready to get to work if that is the verdict of the country. It is not simply a rejection of the Conservative Party, it's an endorsement for a new type of politics, and we fully intend to bring that about.
But there's not an element in that we're going to be more radical than people thought, of we are the masters now, the famous phrase that was uttered the last time Labour had a landslide like this.
Not at all, not at all. We will honour our manifesto, we'll fulfil it. I think the feature of this election is that people thought the Conservatives, and rightly so, had betrayed the trust that they had got from the British people in 1992. It was a record of broken promises. We are determined that there is a bond of trust between a new government and the British people, and it certainly would be my intention, whatever job I hold, it would be my intention to build that trust between the government and the people. This is not just a result about the past. This is a result that is an endorsement for a new type of politics. It is now our duty to bring about.
I thought you had been assured that you were going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I don't think you take anything for granted. As I said to all my candidates on Monday, I'll wait and see.
Okay, Mr. Brown, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Wrexham about to
Conservative
declare.
Party candidate, 8,688. Cronk, John Edward, the Referendum Party candidate, 1,195. Lowe, Nicholas John, Natural Labour Party, 86. Marrick, John, the Labour Party candidate, 20,450. Plant, James Kevin, Plaid Cymru, 1,170. Thomas, Andrew Martin, Liberal Democrat, 4,833. And that John Marrick has been duly elected to serve as member for the Wrexham constituency. The number of ballot papers rejected...
So John Marrick holds the seat, his majority 11,700. Conservatives in second place, but, and a big but, this is the swing in this third result. 7% from Conservative to Labour, so a lower swing, well above the amount that's needed for a substantial Labour victory, but below the kind of 11% swing that we got from the first two seats. Tony, what do you make of that?
That's absolutely right. It does look as though there's going to be a considerable drop in the turnout in these very safe Labour seats. And it's very hard to say what the effect on the swing of that is going to be. But notice, as you said a moment ago, a swing of 70% would have Mr.
Of 7%.
7%.
70% would have...
It's the kind of language we've been talking till now. Would have Mr. Blair very comfortably in Downing Street indeed.
Tony, Peter.
Well, David, yes, you have to see how cautious you must be about these early results, because here we have now, there's the pendulum at 0, and the swing, of course, is to Labour. Now, here is the swing in Wrexham. On beyond 4.5% that they believe is an overall majority, but stopping at some 7.5% to Labour. Now, we think from our exit poll that these safe Labour seats like Wrexham, and I'm going to go on now to Sunderland South, and Sunderland South, are likely to produce smaller swings than the seats held by the Conservative, particularly the Conservative marginal seats, but of course we can't be sure till we get real results from those seats. But that Wrexham swing clearly is rather under what our exit poll was suggesting might happen in safe Labour seats. So we have to be cautious, but we're still looking at a very solid Labour majority indeed. We're waiting for a Conservative-held seat before we can be certain, David.
Thank you very much. I think that the Tories may well have conceded Southport to the Liberal Democrats, but we shall hear about that in a moment. Jeremy.
David. Well, now, Cecil Parkinson, you're now chairman of a fertiliser firm. How deep is the mess you're in at present?
Well, I think we're clear. I'm chairman of a number of other companies too, by the way, and it's artificial fertiliser.
That just seems the most appropriate one.
Artificial fertiliser, just for the record.
Oh,
chemical fertiliser. Very dangerous stuff to immerse oneself in. Well, I think that clearly we're not going to have a good evening. It's very early days. I would have thought it's fairly clear we will have a Labour victory. But I think I don't buy any of this analysis about disunity and so on. We've just been there for 18 years. It's 23 years since the Labour Party last won an election. And I think the mood that I found going around the country, people were saying, look, it's just time for a change. I was coming down in a train the other day from Birmingham, a couple of businessmen said, look, I'm doing very well, but I just feel you've been there long enough. It's time for a change. And I think that that is the most emotive political argument. And I think it's a very compelling one when a party's been in power for as long as we have.
David Steele, we've yet to have a Liberal Democrat, a meaningful Liberal Democrat result from anywhere, but from where you stand, what is actually happening? Do you share Cecil Parkinson's view? It's just general ennui?
I share that very much. I think the Conservative Party was on a hiding to nothing at the start of this campaign. Supposing there'd never been any divisions, supposing the economy was wonderful and all the things the Prime Minister said was true, I still think that they would have lost, because I think that there has been a mood for change, coupled with the modernisation of the Labour Party and a strong Lib Dem campaign. I think they had no chance of winning. In fact, they messed it up as well, but that's why they're losing so badly.
It does sort of tie in with what you were saying, Neil Kinnock, doesn't it? That it needed that extra term, in your view, in order for Labour to go that extra distance.
In some respects, yes. But what makes the difference between the scenario that David describes rightly and what's happening now is the way in which the electorate punishes divided parties. And we've got every reason to know in the Labour Party that punishment can be savage. Yeah. I think that one of the major factors, not the only one, that's actually producing this outcome tonight is the way in which the Conservative Party, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, has given the impression that it takes itself more seriously than it takes the country. We, for a short period, gave that impression. We've been paying the price ever since. And I believe that the Conservative Party is in that experience now. Naturally, I hope that it will continue for some time.
Cecil Parkinson, when do you think that the party started to fall apart?
I don't think the
well,
party
you were talking about divisions.
I don't think the party has fallen apart. I say that that has not been particularly relevant. The fact that the Conservative Party is the only party of the two major parties, the only one of the two, that has had a real debate on what is a critical issue.
Yeah, but it's done it in public.
I don't think... Well,
I'm going to interrupt you there because Tony Blair is there leaving his house.
Tony Blair now leaving Marabella, his house. In Trimden, a crowd outside. The man who will be the next Prime Minister. Well, being congratulated by people in his Sedgefield constituency. Just a brief appearance, I think, before he sets off to the Labour Club or goes down to the Count.
Let's just wait and see, shall we?
Still being cautious, let's just wait and see. Throughout this campaign, of course, he's been constantly saying we mustn't count our chickens before they're hatched. He'll be only the 5th Labour Prime Minister this century if he gets this job, or when he gets this job, because we're certain he will. Age 44, one of the youngest. Well, Robin, we've only had 3 results in. We're talking all the time about this landslide for Labour. 7% in Wrexham. Pretty good landslide.
It still looks very, very hopeful for Labour. There's nothing we've had on any of the figures from any of the seats declared so far to make us doubt the indications of the exit poll. Labour have undoubtedly had a very successful campaign. It was an amazingly disciplined and professional campaign, and they managed to stick to their chosen subjects all the way through. Tony Blair stuck to the idea of deliverable promises, measurable things on class sizes, hospital waiting lists, kind of things that resonated with the electorate in practical terms, compared to the Tories talking in a much more general sense about concepts like choice and opportunity, which really didn't go down the same way.
What's the effect going to be politically if they do have a very large majority? Is that going to mean they get trouble from the Labour left wing over Europe, for instance, over other issues, pressure to spend more money if the economy goes on recovering, pressure to do things that Tony Blair was very cautious about?
Well, it was a former Tory Chief Whip, Francis Pym, who incurred Lady Thatcher's ire for suggesting that too big a majority wasn't a good thing. But it's significant that it was a former Chief Whip who said that, because you do tend to get much more cutting loose on the backbenches when backbenchers feel that they can afford to indulge a protest, and a smaller majority acts rather more as a discipline.
Okay, you may have seen that headline go across. We'll have all the results, incidentally, on the screen during the night. Sunderland North went across as a Labour hold, and this is the result. This is the 4th result to come in. Let's just see it. And it's held by William Etherington. It's a very safe Labour seat, but the key thing again is the swing, and it's in line. It confirms 10% swing from Conservative to Labour. He's been there since 1992. So we have had 4 results in so far. We're saying on the basis of that Tony Blair will be Prime Minister and that he is going to have a landslide. And what we're predicting is that it'll be the biggest ever Commons majority for Labour and the lowest Conservative share of the vote since over 150 years ago. Peter Mandelson, who managed this campaign for Labour, told us a moment ago what swung it was simply New Labour. It was the transformation of the Labour Party, the rebirth of the Labour Party. And Malcolm Rifkind, speaking from Edinburgh Pentlands, his constituency, said any party that gives the impression of not being united doesn't help itself during an election campaign. Edwina Currie in Derbyshire South, it's clear that going Eurosceptic didn't help the Conservatives one jot, and it didn't bring in votes, it drove voters away. And these are the highlights of the night so far. We just had the Sunderland North result. Here are the other three results we've had, and you'll see the evidence of the swing there. Sunderland South, that was the first one that came in, Chris Mullin, with an 11% swing. And then there was Wrexham, where John Marrick held the seat, the swing rather smaller there, 7%, but still very nearly double what Labour needs to form an overall majority. George Robertson's seat, Hamilton South, where the SNP come in second place, so the swing is not a two-party swing shown in the normal way, so we don't show it. But he did well there. And Putney, the count is going on there. David Mellor, Sir James Goldsmith, Anthony Coleman, the Labour challenger rather, the leader of Merton Council. And as we were saying a moment ago, all of the millionaires. There's David Mellor, looking fairly chirpy. He lost his post in Cabinet as Chief Secretary of the Treasury and then as Heritage Minister over a number of indiscretions, and he was almost unseated by the Conservatives in Putney. They mounted a challenge against him, but he survived that. He's gone on to make a career in broadcasting, but does a massive amount of consultancy work as well, and may not be in much difficulty in Putney. There's a lull while the counts go on at Oldham East there. John Hudson for the Conservatives there. That would need a very small swing for Oldham East to be taken. Basildon, where we were a moment ago. Labour's 29th target. Mitcham and Morden, where Dame Angela Rumbold is defending a majority of just under 2,000, needs only a very tiny swing there. And Nick Budgeon's seat. There's Mr. Budgeon himself in Wolverhampton, looking concerned. Everybody waiting. We've only had 4 results in. It's going very slowly tonight, as I said it would, because of the county councils in England being sorted out. The ballot papers being sorted out takes just simply twice as long to open up the ballot boxes and separate the ballot papers out before you can actually start the process of counting. And incidentally, Sunderland South rather, broke the record by 10 minutes, 47 minutes. They counted Chris Mullin's seat in. Tony.
Can I just say one thing that I think people are losing track of? There's been a lot of talk of the campaign and whether the Labour Party did well during the campaign thanks to Peter Mandelson. The Tories did very badly because of their disunity. But it seems to me perfectly obvious that the campaign, the last few weeks, has had very little to do with the actual outcome. This election was decided months, if not years ago. It was decided when the Conservatives made a shambles of managing the economy just after the last election. It was decided when Tony Blair became leader of the Labour Party and did such an extraordinary job of changing the party's constitution and its policies. If this election had been held a year ago or 2 years ago, the outcome would have been almost exactly the same. I think this focus on the campaign, this focus on a very short time period is a mistake.
Let's go and find out a bit about how the Liberal Democrats are doing. We saw that they were polling 18%, something like that, back where they were last time round, but that they could have a better result this time. Alenka Frenkel is in Torbay. Let's go there first of all. Alenka, the Liberal Democrats got any chance of taking that seat?
Well, in the last few minutes, it is beginning to look as though that is a possibility. The Liberal Democrats are desperately hoping that this will be the breakthrough they've been looking for here, particularly in the southwest. What they're really hoping for is that if there is an anti-Tory, pro-Labour swing, that they could perhaps benefit from it and wipe out the 5,500 majority that Rupert Allison, the Conservative sitting MP, also known as Nigel West, author of spy thriller writer, that they can wipe that majority out. I've just seen behind me in the trays there that the Liberal Democrat, who is an experienced parliamentarian in the sense that he's been working in the Parliamentary Whip's office and he's a Paddy Ashdown man, that his votes have been stacking up and they do now appear to be more plentiful than Rupert Allison's. They're rather upset here at Torbay actually because they're normally one of the first to declare, but on this occasion all the presiding officers were stacked up in their cars with the ballot boxes and searched for a full 15 to 20 minutes before they were allowed to come in, and it has sort of rather held them up.
Okay, Alenka, well thanks very much. You know how soon it'll be before we get that result about?
Well, they're talking about 20 past 12, half past 12.
Right, thanks very much. That's an hour and a bit. Nick Hyam is in Oldham East and Saddleworth, Nick, what's going to happen there?
Well, nobody's very clear. This is a new seat which was created out of Littleborough and Saddleworth, a constituency which went Liberal Democrat after being many years Conservative in 1995, and a former Oldham Central seat, which of course is fairly safe Labour. It's on paper a three-way marginal. Either party, any party could win it. In practice tonight, it's a Liberal Democrat Labour marginal. It seems that there could be as little as 200 or 300 votes separating the parties. The turnout has been quite high, nearly 75%, which might be thought to favour Labour, but their turnout has been lower in some of the wards where they hope to do well. So it's a very close run thing indeed. I think there's every likelihood that there could be a recount. We were expecting a result at about 1:45, but clearly if there's a recount it could be later here in Oldham East and Saddleworth.
It was a spectacularly nasty by-election, at least everybody said it was. Has it been a nasty general election fight there?
Doesn't seem to have been. The Labour were very tough on the Liberal Democrats in the by-election. They accused the Liberal Democrat candidate of being soft on drugs and hard on taxes. This time round it seems to have been much more gentlemanly, much quieter, and that I think is because the national spotlight hasn't been on it in the way that it was during a by-election campaign.
Thanks very much, Nick. Well, we join Shankar Guha now in Rochdale, where again there's always been a very bitter battle going on between Labour and the Liberal Democrats. Is Liz Lynn going to hold on there for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, it's way too early to say, and I'm afraid the indications from the various agents, the people we've been talking to, don't give us many clues at this stage. In theory, of course, this should be a very easy target for Labour. It's the fourth most vulnerable marginal in the country, and they only need a 0.1% swing to shift Liz Lynn, who is the Lib Dems Social Security spokesman. And unfortunately, at the moment, we're not getting very much of a clear picture as to which way it's going. It could go either way.
Liz Lynn took over from Cyril Smith in this seat. Has she managed, like he did, to make a sort of impression on the community, get a hold on the community that stands her in good stead at a general election?
Well, when you talk to the Liberals agents, certainly that's the line. And yes, I think there is a feeling that she is a well-known national figure, not just locally, and she's been prominent in a number of local campaigns, which hasn't done her any harm at all. But up against her this time, Labour have put Lorna Fitzsimons, Fitzsimons, I beg your pardon, who is a rising star of the Blair right wing of the Labour Party, and she was born in Wardle, one of the wards which has moved into this constituency as a result of boundary changes. Now, well, that's a bit of a wild card in the calculations here. It's a bit early to say, but you know, it may well have helped Labour.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, old Bexley Sidcup, the father of the House, the oldest candidate in this general election, the former Conservative Prime Minister, Sir Edward Heath, now 80 years old, looking hale and hearty, a staunch pro-European, very critical about the way that the Tory party has gone on Europe during the campaign, and likely to win his seat. So, Peter... Oh, and Jack Straw also is there. Yes, Jack Straw of Blackburn, the man who will be Home Secretary if he gets the job that he's been shadowing at his count in Blackburn. Has a majority of 6,000 there. It's the seat that Barbara Castle used to have, and he used to work for Barbara Castle as her assistant before he went into the House of Commons. Like many of these prominent Labour people, no real experience in government. They're all new to that. They'll all be on what is called a fast learning curve. Now, Peter Kellner, I'm told that you're getting reports from marginal constituencies about what's going on, and what's the picture you're picking up?
It's beginning to seep out. First of all, some more good news for the Liberal Democrats. It looks as if they've held Newbury and quite comfortably. That was a seat they won in a by-election from a couple of years ago. The significance of this is that at the last general election, the Conservatives won back all the seats they had lost in by-elections. It isn't going to happen this time. We're looking perhaps a 5-figure majority for the Liberal Democrats there. Birmingham Edgbaston, Labour needs a 5% swing there. It looks like they've got that and with a lot to spare. 10, perhaps a 12% swing in Birmingham Edgbaston. Wolverhampton Southwest, another seat requiring a 5% swing for Labour to take it. It looks as though they've got that. And the significance of this is that Labour weren't at all sure that they would get Nick Budgen's seats. They thought that there would be local factors which would keep the swing down there, but they're now confident that they've taken that seat. And we add to that the reports we've had from Portsmouth, from Southgate, Mitcham and Morden, Angela Rumble's seat. They're saying there that the defeat for her is far worse than anybody was expecting. It does look as if the big swings are beginning to pile up in these marginal seats.
It's curious that, because they were very cautious from Mitcham and Morden when they were reporting it. But you're saying information now is that they're doing all right?
What we understand is that, that the Conservatives of Mitcham and Morden, they believe that they have been defeated more heavily than they were believing a few days ago.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much indeed. We're joined by Carol Walker from Birmingham again. Carol, can you throw any more light on what's going on in the Midlands?
Well, certainly we're expecting a result in about the next 5 minutes from Edgbaston, which could be a very interesting result indeed. We're hearing it's looking very positive indeed, nothing definite yet, but very positive indeed for Gisela Stewart for the Labour Party. Now, this is a seat that has been a Tory seat since 1922, used to be Dame Jill Knight's. Andrew Marshall now the candidate for the Tory party, but we're hearing that it could be very positive for Gisela Stewart for the Labour Party, and that result due in about the next 5 minutes.
She had a rather odd campaign because she was born German, wasn't she, and is married to an Englishman, and there was some talk about on the doorsteps people were saying, oh, you mustn't elect a German, and using rather rude a word about it.
Well, certainly, and I think there have been rumours that the Conservative Party were trying to exploit that. But I have to say that also the Labour Party have worked very hard indeed on the ground in this seat and in a number of others of these crucial West Midlands seats, which of course, as you've been hearing, as part of the key battleground. And the Labour Party have been working very hard to build up the support, and very hard throughout the day today to make sure that people actually go out and vote. And I'm sure that that must have helped to boost what we believe and expect to be a win for Labour here.
Carol Walker, thank you very much indeed.